Roger Waters often says there are moments in life that never leave you. For him, the memory of Syd Barrett is one of those. Syd wasn't just a bandmate. He was the spark that created Pink Floyd. When Roger talks about him, his voice softens as if he is remembering a ghost. Even decades later, the story of Syd's rise and fall feels like an open wound, something Roger cannot fully heal from. He remembers the early days when Syd walked into a room and everything changed. His smile, his strange imagination, his wild creativity, he was magnetic. Roger always says that without Syd there would be no Pink Floyd. But the same mind that created magic also carried shadows that slowly began to grow darker. As Pink Floyd became more successful, Syd's behavior became harder to understand. Roger recalls nights when Syd would stare into nothing for minutes, as if he was trapped deep inside his thoughts. There were moments when Syd was present yet completely gone. The band didn't know what was happening. They were young, they were scared, and they didn't want to lose their friend. Roger often says that he wishes someone, anyone, had stepped in sooner to save Syd, but they didn't know how. Back then, mental health wasn't understood. Drugs made everything worse, and slowly the Syd they loved began to fade. To Roger, Syd's story is not just about fame, success, or music. It's about loss. It's about watching someone you care about disappear right in front of you and not knowing how to bring them back. It is this haunting memory that has stayed with Roger for the rest of his life. Before everything fell apart, Syd Barrett was the heartbeat of Pink Floyd. He wasn't just the front man, he was the soul of their early sound. Roger Waters recalls how Syd could turn the simplest idea into something magical, a single chord, a strange word, a childhood memory. Somehow, Syd transformed them into unforgettable songs. In those early days, the band saw Syd as a genius. His ideas were unpredictable, but that was the beauty of it. He didn't follow the rules. When others wrote verses and choruses, Syd painted soundscapes. He brought a childlike wonder to music, something no one else had. Many musicians try hard to be different. Syd simply was different. Roger remembers long nights in a tiny studio where Syd would experiment with echoes, feedback, and rhythms. Nothing felt planned, yet everything sounded fresh. It was this creativity that set Pink Floyd apart from every other band of the time. But Roger also remembers the small signs, the moments that didn't feel right. Syd sometimes got lost in his thoughts, as if his mind was drifting far away. But they ignored it. They were young musicians chasing success, and no one wanted to believe something was wrong. As the band's popularity grew, Syd became the face of a new psychedelic movement. Fans adored him, the press followed him, and the pressure on Syd grew heavier. Roger now says that those early years were beautiful but dangerous. Syd was fragile, far more fragile than anyone realized. In Roger's memory, the early Pink Floyd wasn't just a band, it was a dream shared between friends, and Syd was the dreamer who led them all. Losing that dream would become one of the greatest tragedies of Roger's life. The shift in Syd Barrett didn't happen overnight. Roger Waters describes it as a slow dimming of a once brilliant light. At first it was small things. Syd stopped showing up on time. He forgot lyrics. He stared into space during rehearsals. They thought it was exhaustion, maybe too many shows. They were wrong. Roger remembers the day he realized something was terribly wrong. The band was preparing for a performance, and Syd just stood still, guitar hanging by his side, staring blankly. He didn't blink. He didn't speak. He simply wasn't there. Roger said it felt like looking at a stranger wearing the face of his best friend. Drugs became a problem, too. LSD was everywhere in the 1960s, and Syd used it more than anyone. Roger believes the drugs didn't cause everything, but they pushed Syd deeper into his internal world, a world the rest of them couldn't enter. Some nights Syd was brilliant, creative, funny, full of life. The next night he was unreachable. The unpredictability shook the band. They didn't know how to help. They didn't understand mental illness. No one did. Roger often blames himself for not acting sooner. He says they were too young to recognize the signs. They didn't know how fragile Syd truly was. They simply hoped things would get better. But they didn't. Instead, the darkness grew, slowly consuming the spark that had once made Syd so special. Roger says watching Syd change was like watching a star fall from the sky. You see the light going out, but you are powerless to stop it. And that powerlessness stayed with him forever. There is one day Roger Waters can never forget, the day they understood Syd Barrett could no longer continue with the band. It wasn't a dramatic moment. There were no big arguments. Instead, it was a quiet realization that broke their hearts. Pink Floyd was on their way to a gig. Syd had become increasingly unpredictable, and every show felt like a risk. Roger recalls sitting in the car with the other band members. They were tired, scared, and confused. Then someone asked a simple question. Should we pick Syd up? That silence that followed was painful. They all knew the answer. It was Roger who finally said it out loud. No. Roger says that moment still feels like betrayal. They left Syd behind, not because they didn't care, but because they didn't know how to help. They were terrified that the band would fall apart if Syd remained, yet they also felt like they were abandoning their friend in his darkest hour. After that, David Gilmour officially joined the band, replacing Syd. But Roger says it never felt like a clean transition. It felt like a wound that never healed. Every time he looked at the stage, he remembered the boy who had once stood there, full of light. Roger often reflects that they should have done more. They should have been more patient, more understanding, more compassionate. But at the time, they were just young musicians trying to survive. The day they left Syd behind was the day Pink Floyd changed forever, and it was the day Roger's guilt truly began, guilt he would carry for decades. Even years later, Roger Waters still talks about Syd Barrett with a heavy voice. Of all the things Pink Floyd accomplished, legendary albums, sold-out concerts, global success, Roger says the one thing he couldn't fix was Syd, and he has carried that guilt ever since. Roger often wonders if he could have done more. Could he have pulled Syd away from the drugs sooner? Could he have forced him to get medical help? Could he have spent more time just listening? These questions haunt him, especially when he talks about Syd's final years with the band. Back then, the world didn't understand mental health. Words like depression or psychosis weren't part of common language. Syd was labeled as unreliable or eccentric when in truth he was suffering. Roger sees this now, but he didn't see it then. He recalls waking up at night thinking about Syd, wondering if he had failed him as a friend. Some people blame the band for abandoning Syd, but Roger says they were just confused kids, trying to save what they could. They didn't mean to hurt him. They were hurting too. This guilt became a part of Roger's music. Songs like Wish You Were Here, Shine On You Crazy Diamond, and even parts of The Wall reflect his grief and regret. These weren't simply songs, they were apologies, messages to a friend who was still alive physically but gone mentally. Roger sometimes says that the hardest part wasn't losing Syd from the band, it was losing the Syd he knew. The talented, charming, imaginative friend who suddenly vanished into darkness, and knowing he couldn't save him still breaks Roger's heart. In 1975, something happened that Roger Waters still calls one of the most shocking moments of his life. Pink Floyd was in the studio working on Shine On You Crazy Diamond, a tribute to Syd Barrett. The song was emotional, raw, and full of longing for their lost friend. Then Syd walked in. At first, no one recognized him. He had gained weight, his hair was shaved off, his eyes looked empty. He stood quietly in the corner, holding a bag of sweets. Roger stared at him, trying to understand who this stranger was. When someone whispered, "It's Syd," Roger felt the world freeze. He couldn't speak. He couldn't move. It was like seeing a ghost. Syd didn't seem to understand the song was about him. He didn't react to the music. He didn't smile. He looked detached, as if he wasn't fully aware of what was happening. Roger later said that seeing Syd in that condition was one of the most painful moments of his life. He realized the friend he once knew was truly gone. When Syd left the studio, the band members were silent. Some cried. Roger felt broken. He knew then that there was no going back, no miracle recovery, no return to the old days. That unexpected visit became a defining moment in Pink Floyd's history. It changed the tone of the album. The music became more emotional, more heartbreaking. Roger says that every time he performs Shine on You Crazy Diamond, he remembers that day. He remembers the shock, the sadness, the feeling of losing Syd all over again. It's a moment he will never forget, a moment that shaped the rest of his life. Many fans know that Wish You Were Here and Shine on You Crazy Diamond are about Syd Barrett, but Roger Waters has said that even years later, almost everything he wrote carried a piece of Syd in it. The music became a way for him to talk to the friend he lost, even though Syd could no longer truly hear him. Roger describes songwriting as therapy. Every lyric was a memory, every melody was a message. He poured his guilt, sadness, and love into Pink Floyd's most emotional songs. Shine on You Crazy Diamond wasn't just a tribute, it was a farewell. Each line reflects Syd's brilliance and the tragedy of his decline. When Roger sings, Now There's a Look in Your Eyes like black holes in the sky, he is describing the empty stare he saw on Syd's face in those final days. Wish You Were Here became another emotional outlet. It wasn't just about Syd's absence. It was about Roger's pain of losing someone while they were still alive. The line, We're just two lost souls, was Roger's way of saying he felt lost too. Even The Wall contains pieces of Syd. The character Pink, who isolates himself from the world, was partly inspired by Syd's withdrawal. Roger has admitted that Syd's ghost lived in his writing long after they parted ways.